Now it's time for another Board Game Brawl Top 10 with Nick Meanahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com. Hey now folks, my name is Nick, this is Board Game Brawl, and it is time once again for my top 10 anticipated games of the Essen Spiel Fair in Germany. This is the 2015 edition. For those of you that don't know, Essen, as it is called just for short, is probably the biggest game fair in the world. I think it's neck and neck with Gen Con. Maybe Gen Con has surpassed it. Who cares? They're both really huge tabletop gaming expos. Although I think this one, as opposed to Gen Con, focuses strictly on board games and card games, as opposed to also RPGs. Lots and lots of new releases come out of this. I was pretty overwhelmed by the list. And by the way, the list I use as a source for all the games that I'm going to be talking about today is Eric Martin's excellent list over on Board Game Geek. I'm going to have a link down in the description section which will take you right to that, because there's no way I could even cover a fraction of what he talks about there, and it was really difficult to own down this list to just the 10 that I'm going to talk about. Now, people always complain about my intros being too long, so I'm going to cut it off right about here, but two quick notes. First off, I'm going to go over the my top 10 from last year and where they stand right now at the end of the video. So after my number 1, you can go and watch that. A lot of people love that part of the list. The other thing is that just a couple of caveats about the games that I picked here. I did not pick any games that either I already have, because I got advanced review copies, like in the case of some of the Taiwanese games and Japanese games that I've been talking quite a lot about recently, and also any game that I have actually played that I enjoy, and therefore, while I still anticipate maybe getting my own copy, I just want to talk about new games that are completely new to me on this list. So a good example would be Shakespeare. I actually got to try Shakespeare from Istari, and it was excellent, and I know I'm going to be getting my own copy of that one way or the other, so I'm not going to put that on a list of games that I'm just like excited and there's some mystery about it. Okay, so this is going to be my top 10 anticipated games of Essen 2015. Let's get to it. My number 10 is the second edition of A Study in Emerald from Tree Frog Games. Now, if you've watched my channel in the past, you know that I reviewed the first edition of A Study in Emerald. In fact, I reviewed it twice because I had so many conflicting emotions about that game. And actually, I eventually ended up getting my own copy of the game because at the end of it all, I realized it was a brilliant design and I just needed to have it before I could no longer get it because it is horribly out of print. Now, Martin Wallace announced that there would be a second edition of the game. It's going to be at Essen, and there's tons of controversy about it, well, at least within that very small niche audience, because some people said, why would you mess with perfection? Now, I don't think that the first edition was perfect, and that's why I am interested in the second edition. I want it to be shorter. I want it to be a little more streamlined. I want it to be a little bit easier to get into for any type of gamer. I don't think this is going to replace the first edition, but I would love to have it as a companion piece. It's even got a brand new artwork on the board, and the cover looks amazing, even compared to the old one, which also looks pretty good, if that kind of thing matters. But that is my number 10, the Study in Emerald second edition from Martin Wallace and Tree Frog Games. My number 9 is 504 from Freedom and Freeze. Now, Freedom and Freeze is a designer who I don't always like all of his games. Like, I don't like Power Grid, for example, which is probably his most famous and most well-regarded game. But I have a great deal of respect and admiration for him because every design that he makes is really unique, always has interesting themes, and he just tries to break the mold in different ways. And 504 is probably the most flagrant example of that. If you're not familiar with the concept, this has been getting quite a lot of buzz in the past year. 504, the reason it's called that is because, technically speaking, there are 504 games in this box. This box has all the elements of any kind of board game you can imagine. Pick up and deliver, racing games, resource management, worker placement, all these different elements, and you can combine several different elements together into a unique game. You can have a pick up and deliver racing game. You can have a worker placement, negotiation game. All of these different things, such that there will be 504 total games. I have no idea if this is actually going to work or not, but the idea is incredibly intriguing, and I just love the idea of it, and I gotta give it a shot. That is 504 from Freedom and Freeze. Okay, every year when I make this list, I try to do like a Hail Mary pass and see if there's like a unique gem of a game that no one's really talking about, a hidden gem of a game, and see if it actually pans out within the next year. This is my Hail Mary pass. This is the Faith Sci-Fi RPG core set. Yes, this is an RPG. However, all the literature I read on the game seems to imply that this is more board game elements mixed together with RPG elements. Like players use cards. There's like card-driven RPG gameplay. It's got a really interesting science fiction theme, and it looks really, really cool. I don't know, I just kept gravitating towards this one because I've been wanting that storytelling experience mixed in with my board games to sort of bridge that gap between RPGs and other tabletop games, and I haven't found that yet. I really have not. Maybe this will be the one. It hasn't been getting a lot of buzz, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not going to be good. So that is the Faith Sci-Fi RPG core set. I hope it's good. Another sleeper game that I hope works out for the best is Dojo Kun from Yamaya. I really am intrigued by the concept of this game and the theme married together with the mechanisms. This is a worker placement game, but it's a worker placement game where every player takes control of a different fighting dojo that is trying to compete for these two tournaments, the White Lotus tournament and the Black Lotus tournament. I love the idea of it. I love that you're like training these athletes through what are Eurogame mechanisms, but hopefully the theme comes across very well, and the game has awesome artwork as well, which is just icing on the cake. That is Dojo Kun from Yamaya Studios. Fingers crossed. 2 worker placement games in a row, it's a conspiracy. This is the Pursuit of Happiness from Artipia Games, a studio which I trust inherently at this point based on their previous track record of excellent games. And this one has an awesome theme. It reminds me of games, as at least thematically, games like CV, where it's all about building a life. You are trying to go from birth to death, taking jobs, building relationships, and all of this is done, again, in Eurogame elements and worker placement. Now, that could be a disaster because it can be very tough to put a good theme onto those types of mechanisms, but this one looks fantastic. I love the style, love the design, and I really hope that it works out. Again, it is Artipia Games, so I have high hopes. That is the Pursuit of Happiness from Artipia Games. Time for the obligatory, I wish I had backed this on Kickstarter when I had the chance game. This one is Journey, Wrath of Demons from Marrow Productions, which really is a production. This thing looks amazing as far as the miniatures and boards and artwork, and I love the theme too, which is like sort of a retelling of the Tale of the West, I believe it is, the old Chinese folklore, but of course highly dramatized, and it's a cooperative game as well. I don't know why I didn't back this on Kickstarter. I think it must have been at the time when I was too stretched thin and I just couldn't afford it at all. But I regret that now because I desperately want to try this game. I know that I believe that backers have been getting it and saying really good things about it. And hopefully it will be hitting retail soon and I'll get that second chance. That is Journey, Wrath of Demons from Marrow Productions. I think I've been forgetting to say the number for these. But anyways, the number 4 anticipated game of Essen for this year is the only expansion on this list, and that is the Ta Seti expansion for Kemet. Now, criminally, I have not reviewed Kemet yet, despite the fact that I've owned it since before I started this channel. Maybe that's the reason. It just kind of slid through the cracks, and I just kind of forgot about doing it in the wave of all the new games coming out. But I'm telling you right now, take my word for it here and now, Kemet is an awesome game. I love it. It's fantastic. It's combat that is not too punishing, but the game encourages combat. Great miniatures. It's from Madagascar, so you expect that sort of thing. So, of course, I'm going to want an expansion for that. This one introduces a brand new type of pyramid for you and the other players to control and try to get new tiles for. There's new monsters. It just looks phenomenal, just like the base game. I can't wait to get my hands on this one. That is the Ta Seti expansion for Kemet from Madagascar. My number 3 is The Big Book of Madness from Yellow Games. Now, I put down The Big Book of Madness as my number 2 most anticipated game, period, on the list that I did earlier this year. And so you would have thought that maybe that would mean that this would be number 1 or at least number 2. The thing is, I have read some initial cursory reviews of the game based on some demos that were done at Gen Con 2015, and they were not positive. There were enough bad reviews that I was like, oh boy, what's going on here? But I still desperately want to try it for myself. It has gorgeous artwork. I love the theme. I love the fact that it's a deck building game together with that theme of, being young wizards or sorceresses or whatever, who unwittingly let all of these demons out of this book, kind of like Cardcaptor Sakura. And I just love that idea and the concept, and you're trying cooperatively to put everything back the way it was. I really hope that this is just a case of this game just not being for certain people, and I am still eager to try it. If it works, it's just going to be phenomenal. Who knows? We'll have to see. That is the Big Book of Madness from Yellow Games. My number 2 is Pandemic Legacy from Z-Man Games. Now, Pandemic is a great game that's no longer in my collection. That's not because I just started not liking it. It's because I just kind of got burned out on it. And I think that a lot of other cooperative games that I have just replaced it. Maybe because I like the theme better, or they took the central mechanisms of Pandemic and just fleshed them out and made them a little bit better, refined them. And Pandemic just kind of felt like, I just don't need this anymore. But I can certainly go back to the well for a Legacy-style version of Pandemic. Because the thing is, I really, really liked Risk Legacy. I did a marathon playthrough session of all 15 or 16 games of Risk Legacy, as a matter of fact. But the problem with that is that Risk was a bad game. So it was the whole Legacy format that made Risk Legacy good, not the Risk part of that. So what happens if you take the Legacy format and put it onto a game that actually is good? To me, I hope that that's going to lead to an amazing product. Initial reviews are already through the roof, and I really hope that this pans out. This might actually be a Legacy game where once I finish evolving it with my group, I actually will keep it and continue to play it, which is another reason why I felt pretty safe in getting rid of my old copy of Pandemic. I hope that this will be the one to replace it. That is Pandemic Legacy from Z-Man Games, my number 2 anticipated game of Essen. My number 1 anticipated game of Essen Spiel 2015 is Time Stories from Space Cowboys. Now, I have been waiting for a good time travel game. I've also been waiting for a good storytelling card game. These two things seem to be as elusive as Bigfoot or the Yeti, the Arctic version of Bigfoot. Now, but I could not find good versions of these games for me personally. Nothing that really worked. Is this going to be the one? I really, really hope so. And early reports are pretty positive and pretty encouraging in that regard. You all play like time travel agents who are trying to, time travel police who are trying to keep the time stream intact. And you do this through going through different stories. You all have roles. You can flesh it out as much as you want with like role-playing aspects. And it's supposed to have solid mechanisms to back it up. Think of things like Tragedy Looper, where you're looping back and forth through time, trying as many times as it takes to get it right. It looks great. The artwork that I've seen looks amazing. I really, really, really have high hopes for this one, and I think this could be the one. I think this could be one of the best thematic board games I have ever played. I definitely hope so. There's a lot of hope in this list, as you can tell. But hey, that's the same thing with any of these lists, Gen Con, Essen. You're just rolling the dice, hoping for the best. And in this case, I think we might have a winner on our hands. So I'm pretty confident in my number 1 anticipated game of Essen. That is Time Stories from Space Cowboys. We'll see. Alright, so that's the top 10 for this year. I hope you found some interesting things there that maybe you didn't even quite know about. Trust me, there were a lot of games I could have put here. Really, I'll say there's about maybe 20 to 30 that were solid picks. And it was pretty easy to get down to maybe 17 or 18 games, but from there it was tough. There's a lot of games that were really interesting, so I do encourage you to go and check out Eric Martin's Geek List, where I got all this information from. Again, I'll have the link at the bottom. He does great work, and it's a bit of a bear to get through the list because there's just so many games, but I think it'll be worth your while. You might find a lot of stuff that you didn't even know was coming out. But in any event, this is the top 10 games that I did last year for Essen 2014. I like to recap these kind of things whenever I do this list, or really a lot of my top 10 lists, including the Gen Con list, because it's good to see that I actually play the games, that I enjoy them, which ones were bummers. And actually, I think I have a pretty good track record on this one. So my number 10 last year was Lap Dance from Artipia Games, which I have right here. And I have to say, it's not a very good game, but I am holding on to it because it is one of the most unique themes ever. I kind of like the idea that it's being subversive and kind of going against the grain of so many really family-friendly, generic, and dull themes that we have out in the board gaming industries. And it is okay as a game, so I'll hold on to it for now. But, I would say that I could have picked worse things for my number 10. My number 9 is also from Artipia Games, and that one, I will say, unequivocally, is an incredible game, and that is New Dawn. This is set in the Among the Stars universe, although it is an area control game with really cool little plastic bases and things and cool card play. Solid game. Really enjoy that one. Great pick. I wish that had been higher on my list. Then we have... Oh, this is sad. Okay. The Voyage of the Beagle expansion for Robinson Crusoe from Z-Man. I have not played it. Well, that's not true. I started to play the first scenario solo, and then I just got sidetracked. And I've gotten sidetracked for the last 6 to 7 months that I've owned it. So sad. It's just hard to get Robinson Crusoe to the table because it is so long and so difficult. I was just going to play through the expansion solo, and I haven't even had the time for that, but I do want to get to it. I've looked through everything. I know it's solid. It's just a beast to get through all of it, and I can't really review it, I feel, until I can at least go through most, if not all, of the scenarios. So, one day. Then we have In Love and War, which was a cute little Taiwanese game that's... I like it, but it is just complicated rummy. I'm not going to deny that, but it has really adorable cat artwork, so it was worth it for that. Number 6, I have no idea what happened to this game. It's called Rice, R-Y-C-E, Empire of Sand. It had incredible-looking miniatures and a board. It was like this 3D kind of like weird area control game, I guess, with an interesting theme. It just was like a beautiful game, and... I'm not sure what happened. It was supposed to come to Kickstarter. The designer mentioned something to me about it, and it just sort of disappeared. I'd be really curious to know what happened to it. Then we have Room 25, Season 2, which I do have here. It's a big box expansion, along with a bunch of updated stuff for the original Room 25, which was a really cool social deduction game that was similar to Cube, the movie. I really enjoy it. I will say that there were some production issues with it, which I don't know if mine just didn't have it or they just don't bother me that much, where like some tiles were slightly off color from the others, which could potentially ruin the game, but I didn't have any issues with it playing up until the point where I reviewed it, so I don't know. I like it. Then we have Trains Rising Sun, which... This is all of my train stuff in the same box that won't even close because I got extra maps and things. But yes, I do have Trains Rising Sun, and it is... Sorry, hold on. It is a good game, just like the original Trains. I was a little disappointed in some of the cards that there wasn't some better, more interesting ones, but it's just more fodder for Trains itself. Can't really go wrong with that. Then we have Mysterium, which... Sorry, I have these games all over the place. When I put Mysterium on my list last year, I knew next to nothing about it. I just knew that the concept seemed cool and there was a lot of buzz about it. So it was kind of a bad one probably to put at the top of my list, but it panned out because Mysterium is a really, really great game. This is the Polish edition of the game, the new edition with new and maybe better artwork and some interesting mechanism tweaks did just come out at Gen Con. I'll actually be getting my own copy of that for review soon. I am probably still going to like the original better, but either way, no matter which copy you can get a hold of, do so because it's great. Then my number 2 last year was League of Hackers from Moa Ideas Game Design. Great little game. Really, really a big fan of this small, I think Taiwanese company. And yeah, I've played it quite a few times and I dig it. And then my number 1... I saved the worst for my number 1, of course. That is Dragon Scroll from the Lamont Brothers Fragger Game Studios. I had never bought one of the legendary Lamont Brothers games they put out. They make one game a year. They overproduce it with incredibly nice, like almost porcelain-like components. And they do a very limited print run at Essen, so I'm like, oh, a game where you're a bunch of dragons going around, and there's actually really cool dragon miniatures, and you're eating knights, and there's a flaming tower of death that you throw fireballs down. That's got to be incredible. I got to get this. It's going to go out of print. It's going to be gone forever. I got to spend $100 on it. And yes, it was beautiful, and yes, it was bad as far as gameplay goes. Very, very mediocre, at least. Totally forgettable, totally random. Just not a very well-developed game, even though it looked incredible. I would vouch for that, but it is gone from my collection and will never come back. So they can't all be winners, but hopefully that gives you some insight as to how this list changes from year to year. I think overall, pretty solid picks. Let's see where we are next year with this year's list. Thanks so much for watching. Take care. Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.